Okay, this is the feedback for the second question for Hatshepsut, Part B. Evaluate Hatshepsut's impact and influence on her time, worth 15 marks. While most people knew a fair bit about Hatshepsut and the reign, and they approached the question reasonably well, what let people down and stopped people from getting really top marks in this was the ability of people to assess the impact and influence on her time, which tells me that we really need to go back over that last section of Hatshepsut in a fair bit of detail and make sure we cover it. To evaluate, well, the way the booklet is broken up, and if I just go to the booklet now, or before we do that, I might just go through the marking guidelines. Here are the marking guidelines. You need a comprehensive and coherent judgment about Hatshepsut's impact and influence. So it needs to make sense, and it needs to be in a lot of depth to get the top mark here. Develops a sustained, logical, and well-structured argument using appropriate terms and concepts accurately. So obviously it has to be planned out. It needs to continue to assess and evaluate the whole way through, and needs to use a variety of concepts and terms properly, and detailed and accurate information from relevant sources. So you need to have references to historians and also to the archaeological record as well for this question. This is really clearly outlined here in the booklet, and we need to go through these last dot points here because it's pretty much broken down into how you'd respond if you get a question on it. So really, we should have done better in this. What we need to understand is, number one, impact is the influence or effect exerted by a new idea, concept, or ideology. So what new things did she bring into place? And influence is modifications, effect, or sway a person has on something. So essentially, when we're looking at Hatshepsut, we're looking at her time. So we're looking at her impact on the 18th dynasty and within her reign. So in the time of her reign and in the period following her reign. So it's not her legacy, it's not whole thing she left behind over time, but maybe it's a little bit of part of that as well. So here's what we need to look at, all right? What effects did Hatshepsut as a female king and dominant partner in a co-regency have on Egypt? What effects did her ideas, concepts, or ideologies have on Egypt? So we need to evaluate the effect of her succession, what she continued and traditions she built on, what she changed and introduced, and her overall contribution to Egypt. So there's all those things need to be looked at. And it's broken up here for you. This is how you'd answer the question. So the effect of her succession, the fact that she went from being the first eldest daughter, then king's great wife, then God's wife of Amun, to regent for a child that wasn't hers, and then the dominant partner in a co-regency. So we need to explain that's where she's gone, and no one did this in their papers. No one looked at the fact that she was a female king and her rise to prominence and the impact of that on the reign. And that was something that really needed to be looked at. So the impact is here as well. There's evidence from Lawler's calendar, biography of Anini for this, okay? And the effect of the break with tradition and what impact that had on Egypt, okay? So that's something we need to have a bit of a look at, okay, as part of this. So we'll have a look at this when we go through this in class as well. So there's the first part, okay, using her role as king, fulfilling traditional role of king through the use of her titulary and also her, the promotion of building works, through her image, all those sorts of things, okay, in the stable and prosperous reign that she had. Then we need to look at what she continued, traditions she built on, and what she changed and introduced. Okay, so again, we need to look at her image. We need to look at the fact that she adopted that what was expected of a king in terms of the throne name, the titulary. Okay, we need to look at the fact that she'd taken on a male gender role and how she perpetuated this through the costume and changes over time. With that, the fact that Robin says that there's issues in terms of what the scribes called her because they weren't exactly sure and they lapsed between the he and the she, the male and the female pronouns. And the fact that this is a situation that was never repeated in late Egyptian history. Okay, and then also obviously the fact that her image was damaged after her death. Then we have the co-regency. All right, we need to look at the fact that she was a co-regent at this time and how the different arguments about that. Okay, then we need to move on to her policies. Right, most of you were very good at this sort of stuff, but you weren't explaining the impact of it, and this is where this comes into it. The impact of her building policy is this. You can't just say that she had a great impact on Egypt through her building policy, or she had a great impact on Egypt through her religious policy. You must be super specific. So you must say things like she expressed her devotion to gods, so they'll bring prosperity to Egypt. That's why she had a building policy, because it was somewhere that people could worship the gods, where a cult could take place. demonstrated the prosperity of her reign through the building policy, created employment and probably strengthened the economy through the building policy, communicated her ideas to the people, so propaganda through the building policy. Okay, using the monuments to create new architectural features, demonstrating her originality, and have examples of that as well. Okay, and a political and religious agenda. Okay, and then you need to say that many of these ideas had lasting influences. Right, the building activity at Karnak was increased, prestige of the Amun priesthood as a result, first king to build in Middle Egypt, and a new style of rock-cut temple. This is what we need to be looking at rather than just saying, here's what she did, because what people were doing is they were saying that, they were telling me all the wonderful things that Hatshepsut did, but they're not saying, but it's not really an assessment of her impact and influence, because all it is it's an assessment of her achievement, and that is something that is different, all right? We must be really clear on that. Okay, her style of sarcophagus from her tomb was continued. Legacy of a building program still remains today. Foreign policy. Current historians believe she pursued a traditional foreign policy, so that's in keeping with what was happening in the past, and we need to have examples of that. The impact of that is the stability of the reign, the wealth that people gained, the strong economy, allowed her to finance building programs. Thutmose III was able to launch his campaigns in Nubia and Megiddo because of the successful foreign policy during that co-regency. Okay, so that we must look at the impact, and it's all here for you. The religious policy focused their attention on Amun, promoted gods through building program. The impact of this, cult of Amun received unprecedented influence which affected the rest of the New Kingdom, according to Arsman. Developed new theological ideas, and we've got a whole variety of examples of these are things that she continued, that she initiated. So these are impacts and influences, okay? Ideas were influential, being contributed by other kings such as Amenhotep III in his divine birth scenes at Luxor. All right, and other new concepts continued. The Amduat first appears in Dir el-Bahari, and it's all, as does the worship of Aten. Okay, so these are ideas that started. In her government and administration, again, it's not good enough just to say she had an impact and an influence on Egypt through her government and administration, because you're not really doing that. You're just telling me what her achievements were. Okay, you must look at the fact that you got the Amun priesthood, unprecedented political power, although there's disagreement about that. You must look at the dominant officials in different areas. We must look at new positions, overseer of the prophets of the north and south, etc., etc. So these are the ways that she initiated new ideas, okay, and how they continued through her reign. And again, the role of royal women, later queens and Neferure, that's an impact as well that probably should have been addressed in this question, okay? So it's a very, very clear essay structure here for you, which clearly outlines what those impacts were, okay, and what the influences were as well, and they must be the focus of your question, of your response. Sorry, if you get a question on impact and influence. To have a look at a sample response, we've got here one again from Joe. Hatshepsut had a monumental impact and lasting influence on her time. This was because she successfully upheld Ma'at and existed as an effective New Kingdom pharaoh. So this is more looking at Egypt, Hatshepsut as, you know, does she fulfill the requirements of a New Kingdom pharaoh? And that's more an assessment of her reign rather than it is, you know, her impact and influence on her time. Okay. Such success was evident through her building program, foreign policy, religious policy, and relationship with the administration. Okay. So, and again, we don't talk about the, we're not talking about the co-regency itself and that impact on it. So we need to make sure we take that into consideration for these sorts of questions. Firstly, Hatshepsut's foreign policy ensured her reign would have an immense impact and influence on her time. For instance, despite views that her reign was devoid of war, Wilson and Gardner, Hatshepsut successfully extended the domain of Egypt and adhered to the expansionist policy. So he's done well here in saying that, yes, it's continuing on what was happening beforehand. Okay. For example, she acted as a successful warrior pharaoh, leading military campaigns in Nubia, according to the graffiti of Ty, and collecting booty from Kush, stele of Djibouti. Hatshepsut also defeated the southern lands, Dir el-Bahari, and ordered mapping and generation in operations in Syria, Palestine, Red Chapel blocks. These remarkably significant in ensuring Egypt's dominance in East, thus had a monumental impact on her time. Okay, and again, this has to be linked to Ma'at as well, all right, and stability of the reign. Similarly, Hatshepsut had an integral influence on her time. This can be seen when examining the campaigns of Thutmose III, who led campaigns in Gaza, according to the Gaza inscription, and the South Sinai stele. Consequently, O'Connor comments on the impact of this in her time, ascertaining it was a necessary prelude for the intense and sustained campaigns of Thutmose III. This also, ignore that because I think my wife's missed that a little bit. This also indicates she had a profound influence on her time. Hatshepsut's expedition to Punt also had a monumental impact and influence on her time. For instance, it successfully promoted the cult of Amun and enhanced resources of Egypt. Bradley argued it was a most important event of her reign because it successfully upheld art. This had a monumental impact on economic, political, and religious landscape in New Kingdom Egypt. Okay, you need to explain how, because it allowed the money to therefore to promote the god Amun, cosmic order and Ma'at, focusing on economic stability, focusing on beginning new traditions. That's an impact as well, because it could, and restating old traditions from earlier time periods. And you cannot mention, and I've said this before, I don't know why it keeps happening, you cannot mention Hatshepsut's expedition to Punt unless you're going to mention the Dir el-Bahari scenes. It should be automatic. Okay. However, moreover, Hatshepsut's religious policy had a profound impact and enduring influence on her time. As such, Asman asserts it was her starting point for the revolutionary changes that occurred to the religious history of the New Kingdom. This was because it enhanced devotion to Amun. For example, she developed new epithets for the god, including city god, can't read that, king of gods. She also established a notion of personal piety and direct oracles from Amun. Now, this is very, very good, and it's showing the impact. This had a vast impact on its successfully upholding art. Moreover, Hatshepsut promoted the cult of the female deity to enhance her feminine kingship. For example, she was the motive of Hathor suckling on a small I think that's Hatshepsut. It shows her link to the god, I think. She also promoted Parket through Spiros Artemidos and utilised Dir el-Bahari to promote Hathor. These were remarkably influential, as Bradley argues they were used by future dynasties. Okay, so that's good, but you needed to say, but there were no other female kings. Hatshepsut's religious policy also established the notion of divine kingship, a monumentally influential concept. This is used by kings Amenhotep in his birth scenes at Luxor. Hence, Hatshepsut's religious policy was remarkably influenced and had an immense impact on her time. So that's good too, linking it to what's happening later. Further, Hatshepsut's building program had an immense influence and impact on her time, as it was successfully upheld Ma'at and enhanced Egypt's economy. For example, her mortuary temple Dir el-Bahari was of innovative design at the base of the Theban cliffs. The temple was dedicated to Amun and was a platform for her ideas about the cosmos and how and her place in it calendar. This inspired future New Kingdom kings, thus was highly influential. So this is what we need to be doing. Moreover, she renewed building at Karnak to enhance the prestige of Amun. This occurred through the Red Chapel, which was of innovative design. This was dedicated to Amun and successfully upheld art. In addition, the 8th pylon and the obelisks were significant, greatly influential in promoting of Amun. For instance, Roberts asserts that these were a representation of this god. Hatshepsut also built the Spiros Artemidos, an innovative new rock-cut style temple. Bickel asserts that this was a remarkable temple due to the inscriptions of its architecture. Hatshepsut's tomb also is significant as it was influential in the design of tomb on the future. For instance, a yellow crystalline sarcophagus was very influential in the tombs of New Kingdom kings. That's good. Okay. Henceforth, it was evident that Hatshepsut's building program had a monumental impact and instrumental influence on her time. This was because it enhanced the economy and upheld Ma'at. Okay, so this is a bit repetitive. You need to make some more clearer points. In conclusion, it was evident that Hatshepsut had a remarkable positive impact and enduring influence on her time. This was seen through a dominant foreign policy, auspicious religious policy, and innovative building program. This was also because it maintained a strong relationship with the administration and individual of the Amun priesthood. These allowed her to adhere to the roles of a traditional warrior pharaoh. The successful maintenance of Ma'at, this had an incomparable impact and influence at the time. Okay, so it wasn't bad, and it did have some very good points, but it didn't actually be specific in saying, to the wording of the question. There were some parts where it was excellent, but there were some parts where it wasn't quite specific enough to the question. Okay, so you need to make sure, and we will go through this stuff in class, to make sure that we have a good understanding about what's required for each of those sections.